pandemic got us into a reflective space and made us look inward to see what we can do for the world at large. As a self-expression coach, I became a catalyst for women and started Vani, a one-on-one coaching program for women on finding their voice, to speak up, to be visible. As a storyteller, I spotted there were many ordinary people amongst us leading extraordinary lives, making a difference to the world, and they needed to be heard. Thus was born You and I with Rashmi Shetty, where amazing personal journeys with their uniqueness and individuality are showcased, a reaffirmation of the fact: open your eyes wider. The world is far more beautiful when we acknowledge the presence of both you and I. On the International Day of Persons with Disabilities, we have with us Kavitha Krishnamoorthy, the founder and managing trustee of Kilikili, a network of parents of children with disabilities supported by professionals and volunteers. A social development professional by training, her experience of working for more than 2 decades on child rights and development issues, coupled with her experience as a mother to a child with autism, led her to the question: why are children with a disability not seen in public spaces? Kilikili emerged out of this inquiry with a mission to create inclusive public play spaces where all children, irrespective of their abilities, could play together. A certified arts-based therapist, Kavitha has, in recent years, been involved in exploring the relationship that children with autism have with arts through initiatives she co-evolved that facilitate children's natural artistic expression. She currently co-directs the Cambridge Academy in Chennai, a college-like space for young adults with autism that seek to impart life skills that would enable them to lead a life of dignity in the community, doing what has meaning for them. Hey Kavitha, such a pleasure catching up once again after so many years. But you've always been someone very, very special to me, who was my biggest dot into the world of disability and finding ability in disability. The one who introduced me on telling me that everyone's unique. It's all about us changing our vision. And therefore, I thought no better person than you on December 3rd for the wonderful work that you do. Such a pleasure and honor having you on You and I with Rashmi Shetty, Kavitha.
Thank you so much, Rashmi. I know it's been such a long time and it's really nice to reconnect with you. And thank you for all the kind words that you're saying.
So when it comes to your world, Kavitha, you are always this bright spark, smiling, happy. If you can take us back into your childhood to tell us what it was like, however far you want to go. So how far do you want to take us?
So I grew up actually all over the country, because my father was in the railways and we would kind of get transferred every 3-4 years. We would go to a new city, which was both exciting because it was there was change, and there was meeting new people, making new friends. But at the same time, it was also a bit unsettling, because you'll kind of just about get adjusted to a new place and make new friends and all that, and then it'll be time to move again. So it was a bit of both. We grew up with a lot of, what could I say, privilege in terms of, the kind of houses we lived in, the amount of people we had around us, fairly secure, loving environment. And yeah, I think on the whole, I would say it was a happy childhood, where we were like, because of like when we were younger, my father would be posted in some of these not big cities, so it would be smaller towns. And that I think is a great place for children to grow up in, because also it was those years, the 70s and 80s, when anyway you didn't even have TV. So it was growing up with, just with nature, just, being outside, playing a lot, cycling. I mean, I remember doing all these for hours, like in a place called Buzawal, which we were when I must have been around 10 or so, 9, 10 years old. All we would do in the evening was get onto our cycles and keep cycling around the colony. It was also, I think, a safer time. So, parents would kind of just allow us. We would just, have our tea in the evening and be out for 2, 3 hours. And it was all fine. So I think, it was a little different when I look at kids nowadays, and, how regulated their life is, how many concerns and genuine concerns of, safety, how parents probably don't allow them to do as much because of the safety concerns. So compared to that, I think my childhood was pretty idyllic. I think it was wonderful. We traveled a lot, met new people, learned new things. It was also like learning new languages, because the third language of any state is the state language. So we kind of actually learned many languages because of that. So yeah, all in all, I think it was a lovely childhood.
And it reflects, huh? Even now. So
Yeah.
how, from that happy childhood, Kavitha, what did you meander into that you are now in the space completely on making the world that much more beautiful, especially play areas through Kilikili and so many other things that you're doing. So, what was your college? What influences, especially, and what shaped your thought processes to become this influencer in society?
Well, I don't know whether I'm that, but anyway, I think, a turning point in my life really was this opportunity when I was in my second year college, when I was doing my second year BA. So I would have been around 19 years or so then, where we had an option of, in one of our courses called social work, we had an option of volunteering to be a part with, to work with an organization, with an NGO. And for some reason, which I still don't really know why, because it was not like it was very well thought out or something, but for some reason, I kind of opted for that.
Mhm.
And it's like you said, I think the word you used is very interesting, meandered. So it's like, it's, you do find a lot of kids now give us so much thought, and they're researching what they want to do and all that. I don't think it was anything like that. It was just that this opportunity was there, and I kind of, I don't even know why, but I just said, okay, let me try this.
Hmm.
And so I started volunteering with an NGO called Yuva. This was in Mumbai, and which was then working with children who lived on pavements.
Hmm.
So if you know Mumbai, you know that not too many cities have people living in such large numbers on the pavements or on the footpaths. I mean, you do have, the urban poor living in fairly insecure housing, but pavement dwelling is probably a characteristic of Mumbai and a couple of other cities in India. So this would be just on the footpath. You would have communities where they would have the most insecure housing that I have ever seen. So their housing would only be like some poles with a tarpaulin or a plastic sheet. Very often, in later times, once these flex banners started to come up, it would just be their walls and the roof would just be those flex banners. So so it was a community which was fairly close to where I was studying. I was studying in St. Xavier's College in Bombay, and this was a community very close by called Cross Maidan. So if people from Mumbai would know that Cross Maidan is where many of our budding cricketers are cutting their teeth. So Yuva was working with the group there on housing. Now, again, when I said insecure, what it meant was because they were called illegal, the municipal corporation could come anytime and take away their belongings, take away, destroy their houses and so on. So it was actually quite terrible. So we were primarily working on housing, but also working with the children. And we were trying to figure out what kind of education would be possible for children who live in under such insecure circumstances, because nobody, almost nobody there was going to school. So that's where I began. And I think that, my commitment for college was, I think, something like 2 hours a week or something like that. And now the classes would happen every day from 2 to 6 for 4 hours. From day one, I ended up going every day, and it became like instead of 2 hours, it was like 4 hours a day, 6 days a week.
Okay.
Simply because, I mean, that was what was required. I mean, you couldn't go only for 2 hours and work because the classes were happening every day. And then, so somehow one just ended up kind of going there every day. And it was really an experience that completely changed the course of my life. It was an experience which gave me so much in terms of really an understanding of the realities of the world. So I was coming from a fairly protected, upper middle class kind of a background. To see people living in such poverty was, I mean, it was like a completely different to anything that I had ever experienced. And to see that with whatever we were doing, I mean, also to see all the positivity there. I mean, slums and pavement dwellers or poor people are generally seen in such bad light as, thieves and rowdies and they are the whatever the social evils and so on. But what I experienced there was really so much of positivity, people living their lives like all of us are living, and having their joys, having their sorrows, having their trials, I mean, like challenges pretty much like all of us. And also, but of course, very unique kind of circumstances. I mean, one can't deny it. You can't say that they were just like us, because the level of insecurity they faced was like nothing like people from privilege would face. So obviously there were different kinds of, or very severe and fundamental and almost systemic challenges that they were also facing. But in the light of it also were the dreams that they had, the aspirations they had, the dreams they had for their children, how they wanted them to study, children themselves, and what all they were willing to do. I mean, so all of that was also quite what would I say, I would say inspirational, and more than inspiring, I think it's something that I also drew a lot of strength from.
Now, looking back, okay, this is a very interesting point because somewhere I think this even shaped the way you were thinking because you volunteered, you agreed to volunteer at the beginning at the outset for 2 hours, but every day you were giving 4 hours. Now, looking back, your answer that you just said that you were drawing strength from them, what kind of a strength are you talking about when you are in the position of privilege that you are giving them? What strength were you drawing from them that you just didn't see you were giving 4 hours every day to those children?
See, I think it was it was their ability to live life to the best that they could, even under the kind of very difficult circumstances. So I think it was around something around that. I mean, I'm not still very sure what it was, but it was basically around that. And it's not something that I was very aware of then. I mean, I was all of 19 years old. So
Yeah,
it's not like
yeah.
now when one looks back, you kind of say that maybe that was it. But I did know very clearly that I wanted to go back there every day. To the extent that, I mean, I think, I actually look forward to those sessions or going there much more than I did even to college.
Oh, wow.
So obviously there was something which was drawing me so much, and I mean, it wouldn't be that much if it wasn't giving me something. I mean, you wouldn't, be committing yourself and being so much a part of something if it is not giving you something in return. So obviously there was something, and I know that. See, it did have its share of daily challenges, many challenges, but somehow working with those challenges was fulfilling and meaningful to me, and which is probably why one just kind of just went back all the time.
Because when you were speaking about that age of yours, like you said, 19, 20 is a very aspirational age for youngsters where you have your own dreams, which now maybe you can categorize as selfish, but it's all about you are the center of your universe, and it's your dreams on how you pursue whatever your dreams are, perceive what life is. It's such a beautiful phase where it's all about life and you're looking forward to it. But like you said, maybe at that time you didn't know. Where did those years and those hours lead you to when you were planning your post graduation or then on?
Yeah, see, I think one is it's an aspirational age for sure. It's also a very impressionable age.
Yes, yes.
So what happens, what are the very strong influences at that age also come to shape your aspirations, which is what happened with me. Like before I joined Yuva, my goal was I was quite good in languages, and I used to learn French at the Alliance Française then. And my aim then was to go to JNU and do my master's in French and become a translator. That was what I wanted to do, because I did love, I do love languages, and I did love French, and I thought that that's a great thing to do. And it was this experience that completely changed what I wanted to do in my life. So, when you're talking about the aspiration, sure, it is a phase of determining what your life is going to be. And I think the kind of influences I had, which were more, see, it was also not, I would say, we're talking about like the mid 80s, where I think the level of I think the level of individualism that you see today was not that high. I mean, it was there. I'm not saying that it wasn't. I mean, everybody was looking at, where they would study further and going to the US and things like that. I mean, people around were all doing that. But it was also an age when there was still some, some sort of collective social, socio-political kind of awareness and consciousness still there among students. I mean, even then it was, it was, we were in a minority, but there was. And I think Xavier's as a college did have, people, professors who were leaning towards more liberal in that sense, leaning more towards the collective, looking at social change and so on. So it was all these influences. Definitely UA was one of them. I mean, it was the main influence, but it was also my education in Xavier's.
Okay.
I'm doing sociology, for example, having a lot of like field trips to, dam displacement sites, those kind of things, which also were shaping. So it was, and there was that space, I feel then, which I think is much reduced now, of actually engaging with the social reality, with the socio-political reality. So I think there were these 2 or 3 kind of influences which are coming together, which really, to answer your question, move me from going to JNU for learning, actually going to Tata Institute of Social Sciences and doing my MA in social work. So that's how that whole experience kind of changed. It changed the course of my life.
And in social work, now that you were full-fledged into a postgraduate course on it, uh, where did your focus go? What did you want to do? What did you expect out of the post-graduation? How did your life just pan out?
So, going to Tata Institute of Social Sciences for me was, the reason I chose that as an option was I thought that I had had a lot of experience with field work, because I had worked with UAV then for about 2 years. That is the second year and third year of college. I had worked in UVA, and then I had taken a break between BA and MA, what is now called a gap year. I mean, I said I want to take a break. Then I took a break and I actually worked with UVA full time for a year. So grounding on the ground field work kind of grounding was fairly strong, and I thought I needed a little more of shaping in terms of research and look at policy and those kind of things, which I thought TISS would give me. So that was the reason that I kind of again meandered towards TISS. And the other was, by then my father had got transferred out of Mumbai, so for me it was also an opportunity to stay in a hostel. Okay. Which was post graduation was really that, and it was meeting a complete cross section of people from across the country. Very, very sharp brains as co-students, wonderful professors, many of them who again had this inkling, because I think by then my politics was fairly established within myself. So it was looking at transformational politics, looking at social change, looking at all more the societal processes, etc., which also I would say I won't say all of this, but it was a fairly strong thread even within this. So that's how I ended up doing my MA in social work. I continue to associate with you. I would do, in holidays, I would kind of do small projects and things like that.
Okay, so did you see yourself now slowly shifting into being a change maker, someone on those lines? After post graduation, what did you think? Continue with Yuva?
Yeah.
What were your dreams at that point of time?
Yeah. See, for me, I think Yuva was, I mean, in a sense, because it was the first space that and where these ideas and all were shaped, it was always something I, go back to till today even. I mean, it's always like a homing pigeon. I'm always like kind of going back to Yuva. So right after I finished my MA also, I was very clear that once I finish MA, I'm going to work with Yuva full time. So it was like, I never, gave interviews for other, because you would have campus placements and things like that. I really didn't go for anything because I knew I was going to work in Yuva. So that's how I kind of, came back to Yuva. I think because, see, I mean, that's the place I started with. So it's like, that shaped you, and, then you're saying that that's what I want to do in my life.
Yeah, yeah.
Though by then, because of TISS, I had exposure to different kinds of things, but I think that foundation, and I mean, the kind of training in Yuva was so strong and so fundamental that kind of, orientation does, I mean, it stays with you. And like I said, also at a very impressionable age. So it's like, that it just became that's what I want to do in life. And see, this change maker and all these are really, really big words. For me, it was just what is it that I'm very comfortable doing, and I mean, let me just do that. That's really what I want to do, kind of a thing. And it was not about, it never was about me as a change maker as much as me being a part of Yuva, which is really a larger, which is trying to impact society in a larger way, and me being a part of that process rather than me being a change maker or me being something.
Okay, okay. And then what did life have for you in this meandering journey? What did life have in store? Because I think from there you've come a long way. And how do you look back on those dots, Kavitha, that shaped you to what you're doing today, which is also very interesting.
Okay, so that yeah, so I worked with Yuva till about what 2000. That would be about 9-10 years after I finished my graduation, post graduation, and then I met the man was to become my husband. So I met him at a workshop where he was facilitating a personal growth workshop, and of course we kind of fell in love, and then we decided to get married. And at that time, I think we were thinking that we didn't want to continue living in Mumbai as a family, because somehow it was fine for, when you are like single and footloose and fancy free. But with a family, it was because, I mean, we did live there for about 6 months, but like I would leave home at around 8:30 in the morning and come back at like 10:30 in the night. So, we were like really questioning whether this is the, I mean, then where does, and I was working Saturdays. So, it's like, I mean, that's the culture in Mumbai. So anyway, we were working like that. And then we were saying like, I mean, if it's like starting a family and all that, I mean, would this really be the best kind of place to stay in? Or would we like to go to some quieter, at least the pace of life is quieter. Also, my parents were in Bangalore. So, which is why we kind of zeroed in on Bangalore. That's how we ended up fairly soon after marriage, maybe 6 months after we got married, we moved to Bangalore. And then I was working with an organization called Maya for some time, which was, similar kind of social change work. So I was working on a campaign for elementary education. And then I got pregnant, and which was one of the most precious experiences of my life. I mean, I was really looking forward to being a mom. And I think it was a wonderful phase. I quit my job somewhere in the third or fourth month, because I just said I just want to focus on enjoying this phase of my life. So I was like, and it was a very joyful phase. And then Anant was born, and I think that was like, I would think is like the second transformational point of my life. So Anant, around 6 months, when he was around 6 or 8 months, maybe 8-9 months, he started getting what we then later realized was seizures. So he would get about 20 odd seizures a day. And it took us a while to really figure out what was happening. And he was not diagnosed correctly initially in Bangalore. And then we went to Mumbai, found, a pediatric neurologist who diagnosed it correctly. And then he was put on medication, etc. But the end result of all this was that there was a lot of developmental delay, because seizures do impact the brain, and that was at a very delicate stage of the child's life, because at that stage is when the brain is growing at its fastest. So at that stage it is this thing. So he did have a lot of developmental delays, and that whole experience of really being a mother was what brought me in touch with disability and childhood disability at that. And it's very strange, Rashmi, because having worked, in UVA, I've always worked with children, with marginalized children. So I've worked with street children, with child labor, and girl children, and so on. And it's very strange that I had hardly looked at disability amongst children. And for me, it was really, it was almost a shock to realize that, 10, 12 years of working on children's rights, and disability had not, childhood disability or disability amongst children had not really been a focus at all. And so anyway, so maybe that was, that, I ended up looking at the whole area of childhood disability. And one of the things that struck me very early, because he was then very young. Once you get a diagnosis, then the parents and families get into that spin of, which therapy to go to, what to do. And, you're constantly trying to do, even if you're not wanting to fix the child, but it is, I have to give him the best that you can give at this point of time. So there are so many things happening around, and you don't know what to do. So it is very, very overwhelming. It was, in some ways, there was so much knowledge, and it was, some of it was like, it's very confusing and very overwhelming to have such a lot of this thing. But we were lucky to find some good professionals in Bangalore whom we could trust. And then we just said, okay, we're sticking to this. Whatever else is happening in the world. So anyway, so that brought me in touch with other families who had children with disabilities, primarily neurodevelopmental disabilities, because Anand's was a global developmental delay. So it was largely, disabilities like autism, ADHD, learning disabilities, are those families that I would come across wherever we were taking Anand for therapy. And I think then was the struggle to find, schooling, which was relevant, which was meeting his needs and yet inclusive, which was the initial struggle. It was almost 9 years. Very nice schools. I think he was in very, very child-centric kind of, preschool and early education. But I also figured out by the time he was 9 that, while these were great schools, they were inclusive schools. They followed, like, say, the Montessori or the multiple intelligence approach, and they were very welcoming of him. There was not too much pressure. They did try their best to do whatever they could for Anand. But the fact is that they were all not geared to meet his needs, simply because they did not understand, what it means to have certain, difficulties. So by the time he was 9 is when we moved him into a special school. And that was actually a good decision, because finally he was in an environment where he was, totally understood, and where he could get the kind of inputs and the services that he required. And so for me, it was actually, there was this, questioning this whole thing of whose need is that inclusion? Is it his need? Is it serving him, or is it my need? So that's of course a side thing. But to backtrack a bit, when very early, when we would keep, taking for therapies and all, he was all of 1.5 years old. And I would just feel that all of us are just running after these therapies and whatever. And somewhere the most, fundamental element of childhood, which is play, is completely being missed out. Because And it was strange, Rashmi, because all the doctors and the developmental pediatricians, everybody would say, children should play more, and they learn so much through play. And in early ages, it's basically play, which all children learn through, etc. And yet, not so much for Anand, because we didn't overschedule him so much. But I would find that around me that a lot of families, or were like doing a lot, so they were constantly in this rush to kind of catch up, maybe. So everybody, I mean, the play as something which is fundamental to a child was somehow being missed out, which was what one was seeing all around us. And I questioned that with myself also, that, I mean, is Anand growing in an environment where, there is playfulness, there is joy, while all the other things are also being done. And then once we would go, Bangalore, so you have all these neighborhood parks where any young family every evening, I mean, what else do? You go to the park. So we would also go to the neighborhood, one pretty little small park, it's just a neighborhood park, nothing fancy. And my husband Ganesh happened to mention that, we don't see kids with disability in a park. Now, why do you think that is so? And that kind of got me thinking that, which is true. You don't see, I mean, if anyone who has young children would know, you are taking your child to the park. Do you really see, young kids with a disability in a park? You don't. So why is that? So I started kind of Googling around, and then I found that there were spaces in the Western nations, so which were called inclusive play spaces, which had play equipments, and the whole environment made such that children with all abilities could play there together. So that kind of started, me thinking. And I think it was also, by then Anand would have been about 2.5 years old. And from the time he, got diagnosed, and then we got into this whole, the medical and everything else, I was not working anywhere. So I initially would take up some small, documentation kind of assignments, which were more home-based kind of thing, but I was really not enjoying those. And I mean, I was really completely cut off from work or everything that, was, I would say, in a sense, was so central to my work, to my life before. So I think personally also, I was probably looking for something in some way in which I could, while not compromising, being with my son and doing what is required for him, yet find a way to get back into something in this line. And it was obviously then not very clear what that something was. But obviously it must have been there, so that's how I started kind of talking to people, first I started talking to all the moms around, because when you're waiting and your child is in therapy, you're waiting, and so you generally kind of start chit-chatting. I started talking to them, I started talking to his therapist, started talking to various people about this whole area of play and what can we do.
Did any of them also reflect with you or say that, yeah, the places are not inclusive, people don't give a thought about it, or they didn't see that at all?
I think one was that not many of the kids we met had physical disabilities, because we were basically in spaces of therapeutic and rehabilitative services for children with intellectual and learning disabilities. So it is mostly the ones children with physical disabilities somehow have the, I mean, they're not even able to go to a play space because of the physical challenges itself. Our kids were able to go, but were we taking them there, and were what they were doing there, meeting their needs was a secondary issue. But the primary thing of at least being able to go to a park was at least not that much of a challenge for us. But the question was, how many people were actually even taking the kids to the park? So for here, it was more a thing of bringing it to consciousness that, kids need to play, and can we really kind of make that also a priority. And I think all therapists would say, take them for half an hour to the park and so on, they would do. But and families would, to the extent possible, they would kind of do it. Not always, because there are also many, many difficulties that we face as families, and therefore it may have been difficult. But I think everyone saw the need. And people did see that, of course, when you started talking, and then it is like, yeah, of course, our kids should be playing with other kids. Of course, this should be happening. And slowly a small kind of a group of parents, small group, very small group, it was some 3 or 4 parents formed, and we started looking at what do we do about it. And one thing we were clear about was that this needs to be, I mean, whatever we, form or whatever it leads to, needs to be something in a public space. Primarily because we felt our kids were, they were not even in school then, they were really young. And we felt that they are very isolated. They're isolated in, therapy centers or, special schools or whatever. And their interaction with regular society, there was no spaces for that. And so our thing was that why can't play be that kind of the site? Why can't the playground be the site to which will allow this kind of interaction, or at least presence? I mean, even if there's no interaction, at least our kids are seen over there. Yeah. Let them at least start coming. So initially, let's see, of course, now it is almost some 17, 18 years. So the way I'm articulating it was not the way it happened. I mean, it was not so sharp then. It was just that, I mean, why can't our kids also play with other kids in spaces that other kids play? It was as simple as that. And then there were people who told us that, if it's a public play space, you have to lock horns with the BBMP. I mean, how else are you going to get permission to do it in a public play space, in a public garden? So, and they told us that, I mean, why don't you look at special schools? It'll be so much easier for you. But for us, I think as much as it was important to get them to play, it was important to get them to play in a public space. I mean, that was really, I mean, something which was very strong in all of us. So this whole thing of, inclusion was strong. And that's how we started. So we started with the first park, which was in Coles Park in Bangalore, in Fraser Town, because two of our families lived in the neighborhood. I mean, again, it was not very scientific or anything. It was just chance. Another one of those meandering things. So, so we chose Coles Park, and then we did a consultation with, Coles Park is situated with a lot of schools around. So there were 7, 8 schools right around it. So we did a consultation with not those school children, but with children in the general East Bangalore kind of neighborhood who work with children with disabilities. So we took this bunch of children with disabilities to the park, and we asked them to tell us what they would like to be changed in the park. So, I mean, what was their experience of playing and what would they like changed? And that we kind of put down together. Then we also talked to their caregivers, could be parents, could be therapists, could be, special educators, whatever. We did the same thing, that if this park has to be made, such that it meets the needs of the children you work with or you care for, what do you think are the kind of things that should, be put into that park? So it was a very...
You did this just as a parent, not with... No Kilikili was born at that point of time. It was just an inquisitive, concerned mother, along with few other mothers who wanted to get this going.
Yeah, mothers and one father.
Okay.
Well, 2 fathers actually. Yeah. And I don't remember very clearly now whether Kilikili was, definitely Kilikili was not registered. Okay. But I think the name and, something, I mean, the formation was kind of beginning, very, very nice.
But where did you get the name from? It's from a child's laughter or something.
It was very interesting. So there was, a friend of mine in Yuva, friend and mentor in Yuva, was then working on some campaign where she was working with Leo Burnett, the ad agency. And they had come up with some really lovely creative visuals. And then I was looking at this name, and I generally asked friends, can you think of a name? And she said, look, these guys are really nice. I can ask whether they'll kind of do it. And they were doing it pro bono for us in Yuva also. So they'll do it kind of pro bono for you. So then I said, yeah, why not? So that's how I got in touch with this person in Leo Burnett. And I mean, the concept was clear of what Kilikili is going to be doing. And they came up with a list of some 15 names. And one of it was Kilikili in Hindi, which is, like, how does one translate it? Something which is blossoming.
Blossoming.
Like this thing. So I was talking to another friend in the organization I used to work with in Bangalore called Maya, who's also Rashmi Shetty, by the way.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So she was, I was asking her for a Kannada name actually. I mean, so I had asked a few people, and I had asked her for something in Kannada she could suggest. And we were in touch. And then I said, okay, this is the list, and I really like Kilikili. And she said, oh, there is a word Kilikili in Kannada, which means the the wobbling laughter of a child.
Child.
And that seemed, yes, that's the one. I mean, let's go with that. So that's how the name Kilikili kind of emerged.
Okay, and I didn't know it had a Rashmi Shetty connect. Oh, this
One more of the meandering ones.
is seriously. Okay, so you had conceived this and thought about this as a group together so that it's easier when you approach organizations and offices as a group? Oh, wow. Okay. Okay. Life really has reasons to put you wherever it does. And all the learning with Yuva and further on really must have come into good stead in these times, right?
Absolutely. Sometimes I wonder whether, see, it was because of Yuva that, I mean, with the personal circumstance, I kind of, played a role in
Yeah.
doing something which would, be something in the social space. Like, I sometimes wonder if I was a lawyer, for example, maybe I would have looked at what are the legal or policy kind of things that are needed and, done there. Or if I was an architect, maybe it would have. So, I mean, definitely my education and my training and my work experience, which was my earlier, earlier influence or whatever, definitely I think that played a role determining what I made of the personal circumstance that I found myself in.
Yeah.
I mean, definitely, because I don't think otherwise this would have happened. So it definitely is all those early, what we just spoke about, all those influences, which probably led to what was to come.
Yes, yes. And so life, I think that's the beauty of life, and like Steve Jobs said, when you look back and connect the dots, you realize why.
Yeah.
And yeah, so thus was this small little group, Kilikili, which is all about creating inclusive spaces. And how did it go then on? You could easily get through with the BBMP and get places inclusive, get people inclusive in their thought process.
So when we began, the first we went the group of us, we went. Okay, so what happened after the consultation was there was one special educator, Meena Jain, and one architect, Chitra Vishwanath, who were part of these processes, when we had the thing. And they were very interested. And we also needed a broader group than just parents. So Chitra and Meena both came on board and, really helped us to kind of shape the whole thing in the initial years. Because Meena, because of being a special educator, she was so clued into the whole scene in Bangalore. Because I was also, my son was about three and a half years old. And I still didn't know the landscape so much then. I mean, it was really more of, I knew a little bit of, where he was plugging into, but not really the entire sector or whatever. It's all new to me. And so Meena helped a lot in those early years in really, making connections, putting me in touch with people and so on. And Chitra was, I mean, absolutely like a backbone of support in terms of really the technical things, because it required that. She's one of the foremost architects working in sustainability architecture in India. And she would, she was so committed to this whole concept and this thought. And she continues, even today, she kind of, it's so many years and she continues to kind of help us out whenever we need. And she's been really a backbone of support. So it was actually the three of us who formed ourselves into some kind of a loose team where we were doing, kind of doing all the groundwork, all that, everything which came out of all these processes. How are they going to, I mean, how does it go from there to something that can happen in a public park, in a BBMP park? I mean, that whole process is what we were working on. So a bunch of us parents and I think it was also Chitra and Meena, we went to meet Mr. Jairaj, who was then the BBMP commissioner. And we went with all this, we have to convince him and, what are the points we're going to talk about and, what will really, I mean, what are the points and this and that we went with. And you won't believe it. It took all of 3 minutes for him to say, yeah, of course, do it. And like, we were actually a bit shocked, because we had come with this like presentation and all and saying that, maybe we have to convince him using something. And he was so open, and he himself had, he was, I think, the chairperson of the Association for the Mentally Challenged. So disability was not new to him. which of course I think helped, but he was also a very proactive person. So he just said, yeah, of course, go ahead and do it. And he said, you contact so and so, and they will help you, and that was it. So we were out of his office in like some 5 minutes, and it was really, I mean, it was for all that people had told us about the BBMP. I think it was a great move to begin with. But we did struggle with, because after that it was not Mr. Jairaj. We were talking to even the next level, which was the DCF and all. Even there it was fine. They were very, very supportive. But the actual level of at the ward level and the real people who were the engineers who were working on the site, it took a little bit of time, because we were not willing to do what they wanted us to do. So of course it took time. So it did take a little while, and then we were getting frustrated because we had all our plans in place. We had contacted vendors. We had kind of had designs. All that was done, but nothing was happening. So for the first part, what we had decided was that Kilikili would put in the play equipments, and the BBMP will do the civil works, like the ramps and the pathways and everything that needed to be done. The civil works, the BBMP will do, and we will do the play equipment. That was the arrangement. Nothing was happening. So our consultation had happened. Again, this is all so much of a coincidence. But this series of consultations had happened on one of the disability days. So it will be 2005. So the 2nd and 3rd of December 2005 is when these consultations had happened. And it took us about 3-4 months to get organized and meet Mr. Jairaj and all that. And we were hoping that 2006, 3rd December, we'd be able to inaugurate a park. It was October and nothing had happened. And we were like, okay, now come on. I mean, something should happen. So finally, what we did was we went and told Mr. Jairaj that, look, we would really like to, inaugurate this park on Disability Day. And this is going to be the first public park in India. So I'm sure, I mean, even for the BBMP, it will be a big thing. And we really want it to happen. So he said, we asked him, will you come and inaugurate it? He said, yeah, I will. So we went ahead because nothing was happening. We went ahead and we actually declared that we are opening the park on 3rd December. We printed the invitation cards. I told these guys that, look, your commissioner is coming to inaugurate the park, and here's the invitation. And you won't believe it, it actually worked, because the whole system then got, I mean, and there was pressure, that to do it. And it was within a matter of a month that they actually got things. So actually things can happen, but they don't. I mean, they just don't.
Yeah.
And, so anyway, so that happened. And then we kind of, 2006 was the first park which we inaugurated. And which was a great moment for all of us, because it was something that everybody, Mr. Jairaj did come, he did inaugurate the space. And when he inaugurated, he also, that time Bangalore had only 3 zones. The corporation had 3 zones. Yeah. So this was in the east zone. So he said one in the west and one in the south. He sanctioned then and there. So that was how subsequently, I mean, it took us about 2 years, but subsequently the park in Gayatri Devi Park in Rajajinagar near Nabrang, and the park, M.N. Krishna Park in Baswangudi, these two also became inclusive play spaces.
So with that, set out your journey. Then, after inclusive play spaces?
So, well, just making the park was not enough, because what happened was, 2 things happened. One is in Coles Park, what happened was within a month, every equipment was broken.
Why?
It took just a month. Primarily because, see, I think Coles Park, the play space in Coles Park, the park is a lovely space, but the play space in Coles Park was completely neglected. And nobody was giving it any attention. I mean, when we went to see, do the consultation with the kids, there were just these broken swings and slides, and nothing was usable. So when this thing happened, I mean, when this, fairly fancy, colorful, the regular stuff, not anything, this thing, but it looked very nice, looked colorful. There were lots of it. All that happened. The place also has a lot of children. So the usage was like very, very high. Which I'm not saying is wrong, because I mean, a public play space is for kids to use and kids will use. Yeah. The point is that in a space which was underserved, when you had something like this, of course, kids were using, and kids were overusing it. I mean, overusing in quotes. I mean, I'm not saying it in a bad way.
Yeah.
But I mean, there was a lot of traffic, let's say. Because again, there are so many kids, and it's actually very beautiful, because, for example, kids would go across from school, going home, they would go across the park, which is a beautiful thing. And then they would play and they would go and so on. So I think the usage was very high, and things got destroyed. So the first task for us was really to kind of set up the whole space. So which was what our energies went in. The second thing we realized was that special kids were still not coming to the park. So we realized that yes, the physical infrastructure, the equipments, the ramps, all that is important, but there is also a social component which we had not thought about at all. We said, this is something that everybody wants, and once it is there, people will come in droves, which was not happening. So we then began a lot of programs of supporting families and supporting schools to come to the park. So we had volunteers, we started something called the Saturdays Family Day Out, where we would encourage families to come. And Bangalore, in a way, we were very lucky. It was also maybe a time when a lot of volunteerism was happening with corporate volunteers, etc. You had organizations which were like I Volunteer and others who were, you had, who are only for volunteering, connecting organizations or causes to people who want to volunteer. A lot of that was happening in that phase. So we kind of banked on that, and we would get volunteers to come, and we would tell families, look, you just come. We have volunteers who will play with your kids. You don't need to worry. So that kind of support, which was more the social support. And we did that with schools also. We said one way of getting special kids to the park is to get schools to bring them. So we started organizing, we kind of located schools around, started, allocating volunteers and days to them. Some of them had their vehicles, they would come. Some we would even support their transport. So we started getting, on weekdays, we started getting kids to come to the park from schools, which was not inclusive, other than if there were other kids who were playing, sometimes street kids would be playing there at that time. So they would also play with them. But it was also a way in which the park was getting used for by, kids for whom it was made. So that's how the whole thing of not just the physical infrastructure, but you also need to look at the whole social dimension and the need for the support and solidarity that families and schools or other institutions face before, at least for a while, before it can become more a way of life for them. So we then actually, along with developing park, we also spend as much time in these kind of activities also.
Wow. So it's not only about facility, it's about plugging in the community to use the facility. Ooh.
Absolutely. And the support that they need to be able to.
Yeah. So here you have three nice, for me, whatever you're saying is a nice visual. So here is a group of volunteers who are bringing the community that needs it to the space that has been created for it. And that's how the entire wheel kind of gets into motion. And did this give you a kind of confidence that you can take it to the next level, Kavitha, after this? And what else did you do? What did you do beyond?
Yeah, so see, actually, we were not very ambitious. We were quite happy doing this because it was also a lot. See, the thing is, we were not like in a sense, we were not an organization. We were registered as a trust, which was needed for, for getting funds, and, you have a face to kind of, you have a backing when you go to meet people, etc. But other than that, we didn't have an office. We didn't have staff. We were just parents, a few parents, and a bunch of volunteers. So volunteers would have their regular jobs, and parents had anyway their parenting, which was 24/7. So it's not like we were, even what we had, even doing this, which was, doing quarterly events in the park, ensuring the Saturday programs happen, ensuring some schools are coming, and ensuring that, the constant follow-up with the BBMP for the other two parks, our hands were full. So it was not that, so we were not even thinking about what is to be done and how do we take it. People would keep saying, you should do this, you should do that. And we would be like, yeah, you come and do it. Because it's not easy, it's really not easy to be doing such a lot. And we were frankly quite happy. We were happy with what was happening and what was this thing. What did end up happening was somehow we ended up getting a lot of good press. And the idea was kind of not that we were approaching, but it was just maybe the idea was novel. And, it's like this, whenever there's a disability day or an autism day, I mean, they'll look for what they want and then they will cover it. It was like that because it was maybe something new or whatever. And because of that, a lot of people were getting to know about it. So people as in communities, people in the community would start approaching us and saying, will you kind of help us out? And so we had this really dynamic 72-year-old woman from Mangalore who was, she was very active in the neighborhood park in her area, and she wanted to do something in Mangalore. So she came and she saw the park and she kind of, asked us what we have done, etc., etc. And then we just shared what we have done. I mean, it was nothing more than that, just what we were doing. We would just be very particular about driving the inclusive bit, because everybody will say, we want to make one special area for special children. And we would say, no, that is not the idea. The idea is not special park for special children. It is a park for all children where special children will also come. So, or, actually that was the only thing that we were pushing. But other than that, it was like really sharing what we were doing. And so this lady, Prabha Kudwa from Mangalore, kind of approached us. Then there was this organization called ISAF, which wanted to do something in Bangalore. There was a parents group from Mumbai called Hope Foundation, which wanted to do something in their area. So this was happening. So the next phase really was where people were kind of coming and asking us, will you help us? And help meant what? We were not really doing any development or anything. We would just really talk about our ideas, what we did. And I think, now looking back, I feel maybe what it did give was, okay, if somebody could have done it there, we can also do it. So it was really more that confidence, because maybe people had all thought about it earlier or whatever, and maybe not knowing how to go about it. And so it was really doing that, saying that this is how we went about it. Maybe it'll work for you. And frankly, I feel in terms of the design, I feel like what they did in Mumbai, what they did in Mangalore, the designs were actually better than what we had done in Bangalore, which was great, because we were also saying, we don't want this. It's not a cookie cutter model. Yeah. We are not saying, this is what it is and this is what you need to kind of replicate in every space. We didn't want that. It's actually the idea which we wanted to see it in different thing, and let it flower in the way it makes sense for that group of people. So that was where our energy went in the next phase. So, in the next 3 or 4 years, we had these spaces in Nagpur, in Mangalore, and I have not seen any of them other than Bombay. I have not seen the Mangalore one. I have not seen the Nagpur one. But it just took a life of its own, and took its own path in a sense.
Yeah. So from there, where did and how did Kilikili spread its wings? And not only that, you're now into something else completely different. So what are you currently doing?
So what happened was, like I said, there were more people who were coming and asking us. And at some point of time, what we also realized, we were also, in Bangalore, we were in talks with the BBMP for at least 4 other parks, none of which materialized. Okay. So it was one of those things that, we were doing the same things, but somehow for various reasons, none of that really materialized. But we were in this development, and we were also finding it like the maintenance issues which were coming up in the older parks, things were, and we were doing everything. Sometimes we were feeling that this is not our job. Our job was not to repair the swinging courts park. But we were doing it because there was nobody else to do it. There was no system. We began to realize that for the BBMP also, these were like, okay, this bunch of parents who are coming and okay, let's do it for them, which is why only 3 happened. Where there are 1,000 parks, even to date, 1,000 plus parks in Bangalore, and only 3 are inclusive, of which Coles Park today is unusable. So in effect, there are only 2 which are, usable. So now what does it mean? That we began to say that, and it's not our work. We said, we as a group of parents and as Kilikili, we don't want to be developing, looking at each park and doing this in each park. That's not our job. Our job is to say that this needs to be done and that it can be done, and this is how it is to be done. And it finally has to become a matter of policy. It has to be something that BBMP and other civic agencies say that, like they have a list of some, 20 odd things that they do, like a fountain, like this, and various things they have, like one gazebo, they have things. And we said, really, we should be able to say that you make an inclusive play space, and that's what you need to kind of do. And that should be our goal. Now, if we were, and I have to admit that we have not been able to achieve that. It has not been possible. Also because one is it's really a long-term thing, and it's a massive, it's a very ambitious goal. Also because we were completely subsumed, like I told you, with what we were already doing. So to kind of take on at this level was not possible. So maybe if there was someone, I don't know what, more ambitious, more driven, more thinking in terms of systems, thinking of broader organizations, maybe it would have happened. But with this group, with us, it didn't happen. And so that is, it's a kind of a regret, because I think the potential was there to take it to that level, but I don't think we really had the wherewithal to do it, and we could not do it. So to date, I mean, we've really not been able to make that kind of a change, though there were some little ambition for that, but we've not been able to do that. But what did happen was, like I was saying, people were coming in. So there were these small things happening. And we said that by then we were about 10 years, 10 odd years old, 10, 12 years old. And we said that, is it possible to document all of this? So that it's available for people like this who are coming, So we actually launched into, that was another big project where we actually launched into coming up with a kind of a manual which says that this has to be a matter of policy. Okay. And for those who decide to do it, here is a how to. So we actually put all the designs till then, not just, what Kilikili had done, but what all these other parks had also done, put all the designs with the, with even the drawings in, with names of manufacturers, everything. So anybody, wanting to do this can actually, in theory, pick up the book and say, okay, I'm going to do it. So we actually, that took a lot of our energy, because we spent 2 or 3 years in getting the manual done, printing it, disseminating it, and so on. But that was really, I mean, in a way that I think marked the culmination of our efforts. Because somewhere, for me as a parent, it was also, I need to move on to what my son's needs are, and the gaps that need, that need to be filled, and not really, be with play was a need at that point of time. It emerged at a particular, at a particular stage in his life, but there are other things that also needed to happen. So I also was very conscious of not wanting to put all my energies only in thinking. It is that, I needed to do other things also. So in a way, so right now with Kilikili, we are available for, these kind of, this thing. Our manual is available, which people can take. And though we hope that people would, just take it and do it, we do still need to play some kind of a role, which is okay. I mean, it's not a very intensive role, so it's okay. So our role really has moved from actual project, development, project implementation, seeing that spaces are maintained, seeing that, both the technical bit as well as the community bit, move from there to really be more of some kind of a consultant, or, a hand holder, really, of people or communities or individuals, NGOs who are doing this wherever in the country, and kind of hand holding them. So now post that, we have now a space in Madurai, which has been developed, one in Chennai, which is already developed, and 2 more in development, and some others that, we are in, we are not doing it, like I said, whole hog, but we are in touch, and we kind of help do it. Yeah, so also what happened was, or at the personal level, what happened was, we moved out of Bangalore. We moved to Chennai about 6 years back. 6.5 years back, motivated primarily by my son's passion for and talent in Carnatic classical music. So he's been, I mean, that's one thing that has drawn him from when he was a baby. It's been music, and specifically Carnatic music. I mean, it's like, I think it's a gift, it's a blessing. And somewhere around the time that he was 9, there were people in the family, as well as, there used to be this young musician who would come to visit us, Kilikili, and we would run this little group of children with autism. She would come and sing to them once in 15 days. And she was quite struck with Anand's musicality, and she kept saying, you come to Chennai and we try and, shape it better, etc. So which is why we moved to Chennai.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so we've been in Chennai for 6.5 years, and continuing Kilikili work, like what I just said. But also, he was going to to a nice school over here, which was, kind of continuing his regular training and education along with his musical training. So both was happening. And one of the things I observed in, in older kids who had, kind of moved out of his school, was that at least three or four of them that I was in touch with were the kids meaning young adults then, all would have been about 18, 19 or so, were at home, not being able to find a space where they could continue learning. So one of the questions in my mind always then was, is that going to be Anand's? Anand was then about what, 13, 14, 15, though that age. I knew he would be in the school till about 18. But the question was, what after that? And if there are no such spaces in the city, which will, where he can seamlessly transition into, then he's also going to be sitting at home. Where will he go? Yeah. So that, again started the whole process of questioning and really looking at what needs to be done and what can be done, and then talking to parents. And so we started a whole process with the parents group of the school itself, the existing parents, as well as some of the parents of the boys who had passed out, but who were yet to find a space where, they could continue their education. So there was almost a year or so of discussions with parents and really looking at what do parents want. We went and visited other spaces in Coimbatore, in Bangalore, which was working with the 18 plus group, because that is also not too many, 18 plus and with autism. Not too many, as a specialized kind of a thing, not too many. And we had found that some of these boys had looked at, there are these centers which look at multiple disabilities, but somehow they were not finding their feet in such spaces, because they are also not geared to the specific needs of youngsters with autism. Yeah. So, so the gap was pretty clear that there was a gap in services, in educational and training services for young adults with autism above 18 years. So then we started looking at what can we do about it, and then this whole conceptualization of what is today called the Cambridge Academy. This was co-founded again by a bunch of us parents and professionals who were supporting the whole thought. So it's a space which, I say that it's a college. Not a college in terms of scale, but a college in terms of character. So what is the function that a college education plays in a person's life? That is the kind of function that this space also plays. We have 6 students now, and it's basically a space for them to, like a college, to explore their interests. What do they really like to do? What do they want to do? Because the other thing we were observing is everybody is pushing them into some vocational training unit. Correct. Now, whether they want to do it, are they interested in it? Is it what, kind of brings meaning to their life? That there is not too much. So typically organizations will come up with what they want to do and try to fit the youngsters in. We wanted to do it the other way around. And we drew inspiration from other groups, like in Coimbatore, one of the groups we visited, which was the Amaze Trust, which was really looking at it from the point of view of the youngsters themselves, looking at their interests and seeing what can be done, from there. So, so then that's how this space started. So it's like we do a lot of stuff. We expose them to a variety of things in the first year. So it's not just a vocational training. It's not only work, while work is a component. So we look at cooking, we look at weaving, and some other things, data entry. We're also looking at jewelry making. And each of this has emerged out of an interest of the kids.
So how are the classes? Online or face to face?
No. We have a space. We have this started in 2018. So we worked for about 2 years in person before the pandemic. In the course of the pandemic, we shifted completely online. And we actually worked 1.5 years doing the entire training online with the tremendous support of the mothers. So all the moms, and we would have a 2-hour kind of a thing every day. And then now since September, we have resumed the in-person classes. So that's happening. But the idea really is to look at different areas. So each of the things that we've started is because somebody was interested in it. Not because we wanted to do it. Yeah. So the first batch of 4 kids, there were 3 who were very interested in cooking. So that's how we started that. And they started making small things like, salads and juices and sandwiches. And the second year we said, let them cook their own lunch. So they actually would be, 12 onwards, they would all sit together and they would cook their own lunch depending on what they can do. So, some of them were like in the beginning stages. So they would just do things like peeling vegetables. Some of them had, could cut, chop very well. So they would do the chopping. Then we trained them to keep rice, soak dal, keep rice. The dal was initially a very simple dal. Now it has moved to sambar and more complex dals. The vegetables were just one little tadka and the vegetable. Now it's moved to, somebody will grate coconut, put coconut. Sometimes it's ground. Then we move to pasta. So, it's like increasing the complexity as they also develop their skills. And it's still the simple thing of we are all eating lunch together. We are cooking our lunch together. But what they are doing has changed. Depending as they have grown, so has our, kind of thing also grown. One of our boys is now ready to, before the pandemic, he was actually interning at a neighborhood small catering outfit where he would go and help chop and help, do some of the prep and stuff like that. So various things. So work is one part. And in this period, sometime in this period, I also got, when my son started going to the Bubble Center for Autism in Bangalore, which was a specialized center that he was going to. I had the opportunity to get trained by an art educator and to work in Bubbles in setting up the art unit there, the visual arts unit. So I found that very, very, personally very fulfilling, because it was very close to how I would want to interact with a child. So it was this no pressure. It was not teaching art. It was really letting the child express himself or herself through art, looking at art as a facilitating kind of a space rather than a teaching or a training space. So all of that gelled with how I wanted to look at, working with kids. And I worked in Bubbles for a while. And then when I moved to Chennai, I helped set up a unit here with a parents group. And I also got trained in doing arts-based therapy work with Snehadhara, which is an organization in Bangalore. And somehow arts became quite central to, what I was doing as part of my practice. So the arts is again a big thing in Cambridge. We do a lot of music, we do movement, we do visual art, and we have found the couple of the boys, 2-3 of the boys who really found themselves in these spaces. So one of them is so into movement, and from he's really moved such a long way that now he can actually with his facilitator he can do short choreographed pieces. There is another kid another boy who is so into rhythm, and he comes up, he uses the xylophone. We have a wooden xylophone, and he uses it to create such beautiful rhythmic patterns, all of which are different each day. So some of these discoveries have happened through Cambridge. So we look at the arts also as a very fundamental, critical, and very valid. People look at arts as, like, okay, when they have leisure, you give them some crayons and they'll do that. Or, we have somebody will come and sing to them once a week. No, it's a part of their lives. It gives them meaning. So for us, it is constant. The search is really to look at what gives them meaning and how can we develop that. So the arts is another big chunk in this whole program. And the other chunk is looking at community interface. So how can we, really bring them into the community and bring the community into our space. So they do things like shopping, for example, so whatever they are cooking, they have a roaster, they go to the shop, they go to the vegetable vendor, they go to the grocery store, they buy their groceries, provisions, everything. And all of that are teaching opportunities for us. We teach them reading through that. We teach them number, quantity, various things, measurement, all that happens through all these spaces. And it's also, they also like, they're not stuck in the center all the time. They go for half an hour, they go, they're walking in the neighborhood, they are going, they're learning to shop, etc. All that is also happening. We used to take them to a neighborhood gym. So wherever possible, it's not like we bring everything inside, we try and take them out. We used to go to a mall once a week, this whole Big Bazaar initiative of the quiet hour, where they would one day a week, they were keeping it quiet so that kids with autism could come, persons with autism could come. So we use that as an opportunity to go to Big Bazaar. It's in a mall, so we would go there, they would do their shopping, everything with those who are not reading, we would make picture shopping lists. So they started buying first for themselves, whatever they like. So chocolate, Pepsi, biscuits all went into the shopping tray. And then it became what the family wanted. So soaps and, tuar dal and whatever. I mean, so it was a process. Everything was a process of, making it as relevant and meaningful to their life as possible. And then we would take them to the food court and teach them to order food. So again, with their picture card, they would choose like, okay, I want chole bhature, and they would go and show it to the counter. And, so a lot of life skills, but basically stuff that is relevant to them, meaningful to them, and which makes, it makes sense to, learn these things. So that's the kind of program we have. And it's been 4 years, almost 4 years now. This is the fourth year. And it's been a roller coaster ride, but I think it's a lot of, it's giving us a lot of meaning, because we feel it is something that all of us parents feel that this is what we want for our kids. And so it's nice. It's nice that we have something like this going right now.
And the pandemic, Kavita, has been reflective for a lot of us for all different reasons. What did it do to you?
At different stages in the pandemic, it was different. So right at the beginning, it was like we were gobsmacked. Nobody knew what was happening. And, a lot of fear and, this thing. But it was also that first, because it was this complete break from your daily routine, it was also a space of a lot of quiet. So which was also welcome. So, it was a bit of both. All four of us were at home. It was a nice phase of, really reconnecting with the family. I found even with Anand, it was, with his teenage years, there was a lot of, there was some bit of, somehow we're doing things, but I used to always feel the connection missing, which I think any mother of any teenager will tell you that something is missing. But somehow in the initial stages of the pandemic, I really found that was coming back. So there were many good things that also happened. But I think over time, it again, all ups and downs. So there were phases in which we were like frustrated, not able to go out. Getting like, fed up, and those kind of phases also happen. Some kind of getting depressed and wondering when things will this thing. Then the second wave was very because so many families, so many people we knew who were affected, who were losing their lives. It was horrible. So yeah, so it's been it's been a bit of an up and down, and it's also been, I guess, a phase of learning of it. I think we're still very close to it. So one is not able to really see, how it has impacted us in what ways, other than, in these relatively superficial ways in which is easier to articulate. But in what deeper way it has changed me, or or relationships or connections with people. It's a little bit difficult, I think, yet to say, because I think we're still too close to the whole experience to be able to really talk about it.
Yeah, true. And as we move away and come to the conclusion of the conversation, but three life lessons that you would want to leave us with.
One is follow your heart, or follow your passion. I think it's very important to do things that are meaningful to you. Well, like what I was just saying, what we try with the Cambridge boys, I think that's really something that each of us has to do it for ourselves. And it doesn't matter who you are, it is for everyone. And since we are doing this on the occasion of, the International Day for Persons with Disabilities, I feel it is for everybody. I think it is meaning as defined by each one of us. So what's meaningful for me is meaningful for me. And I have every right to pursue that. So I would say that everyone, just pursue what, you feel is meaningful to your life. I think each of us owes it to ourselves to do this. I know when you began about this thing of what is so unique and what is, I think each one of us comes to this world with some purpose, with something which is so unique, each and every one of us, no matter who, and I think it is to discover that and to follow that, to have the courage to follow that. I think that's really what each of us should be doing. And I think society, community, whatever, education has a responsibility to see that this happens.
Oh, wow. Honored to have you on You and I with Rashmi Shetty, and for this amazing, meaningful work that you do, Kavita. God bless you. May you get all the strength that you need and all the inspiration around you that you spread May it help you continue this meaningful work that you're doing, and may your tribe increase.
Thank you so much, Rashmi, for everything that you've said. And I think I have got much, much, much more than I have given. I mean, in each of these experiences, they have made me who I am. And I mean, I continue to get so much from what I do. And I truly believe that I get much more than I give.
Thank you so much for this conversation, Kavitha.
Thank you so much, Rashmi. Thank you so much.
With that, we come to the end of this weekly quest of You and I with Rashmi Shetty. Do let us know if you know people who make the world beautiful. Write in to rashmi.thethirdeye@gmail.com. That is rashmi.thhirdeye@gmail.com. Come, let's explore this amazing world together, both you and I.